everyone! Today I'm going to show you how to make 3 no-sew Halloween costumes for stuffed animals. I know you might not be trick-or-treating this year, but I used to love dressing up my stuffed animals and having them go room to room pretend trick-or-treating, so I hope this video inspires you to maybe try it out. Now let's get started. So this first costume is a cupcake, and I'm going to be making this for a Build-A-Bear, but it'll work with any stuffed animal that's standing up like this. Now here I have a pillowcase which is the perfect size for a Build-A-Bear, but you can use whatever fabric works for you. And I'm twisting this up very tightly and wrapping it around her top. And now I'm just going to continue twisting it and wrapping it around her front. And now with the extra, I'm just going to tuck it into the back like that. Mine got untwisted a little, but that's okay. I want it to be kind of full because this is going to be the frosting. Now we can move on to the cupcake liner. So here I have just a normal piece of paper. And since I just have normal white paper, I'm going to start drawing some polka dots on mine. I ended up changing to a darker pink later, but you can use any colorful paper you want, or if you have scrapbook paper, that would work too. Now I'm just going to take it and see how long I want it to be, and I find it's perfect if I just cut it in half. So after I cut it in half, I'm going to start doing an accordion fold, which is just folding the edge over on one side, flipping it over, and doing it on the other side. And I know I should have done this before I cut the paper in half. After the paper is folded, I'm just going to fold one edge just a little bit so that they can connect like this. And now I'm just going to use regular tape to tape them together. After that, the cupcake liner is almost ready. We just have one thing left to do. The last thing I'm going to do is cut the sides at a slant like this. And right where I cut, I'm going to fold over just a little bit on each side, and this is so we can attach it easier. Now I'm going to grab my stuffed animal and some more tape, and I'm going to put some tape under the fold like this so it can just stick onto her leg and the frosting like that. And I'm going to repeat that on the other side. And to help make it look more like a cupcake, I went in with some folded up pieces of tape and just put it kind of by her knees, and that way it's better attached to her and it looks a little more realistic. Now we can move on to making the sprinkles. So here I have some thinly cut construction paper, and I'm just stacking them like this and cutting off little sprinkles like this. And then you can just cut out as much as you want. After that, I'm going to stick the sprinkles onto the frosting by just putting a little piece of rolled up tape on the back of each one, and now I'm just sticking them randomly onto the frosting. And the last final touch is a cherry on top. So here I have a red pom-pom, and I found this thin twig I found in my backyard. But you could also use a wire or a pipe cleaner. And now I'm just going to go in with a needle and just start poking the pom-pom and just find a good place to stick the stem. And this is just so I don't have to use any glue, but you can use glue if you want. Now the last thing to do is add the cherry on top. So I'm just folding up a piece of tape, sticking it to the bottom, and then sticking it right on top of her head. And that's how to make the cupcake. Now the next costume I'm going to make is a dinosaur. So here I have my stuffed animal. She happens to be on all fours, but you can do this for really any stuffed animal. And I'm just going to lay her on her side on this thin cardboard. This was a recycled cereal box. And I'm going to trace along her back to her head. And as you can see, I already tested this out earlier. And this is going to be where the spikes are. So I'm just darkening this, and then I'm going to add the spikes. So I'm just doing some triangles along the back, and I'm having them a little curved at the top so they're not too sharp. But I'm just going to continue doing that all the way to the head, and then I'm going to cut it out. You're going to want to make sure you're not cutting too far in and separating the triangles. You want them all to be together. Now I'm going to paint it. I originally chose this really dark green, but I wanted it to be lighter, so I went in with a second coat of a lighter green, and then I'm going to paint the other side and let this dry. While this dries, we can move on to the tail, and the cardboard I'm using for that is a toilet paper roll, just because it's going to be a little curved, and it's just the perfect size for this stuffed animal. So I'm just lightly sketching out how I want the tail to look. Now I'm just going to cut it out, and for me it was easier to just shave off a little bit at a time until I got that nice point. And of course, if a toilet paper roll isn't the right size for your stuffed animal, you can always just use any thin cardboard and then just bend it a little bit. So now I can start painting it. I made sure to choose a different green than the one I used for the spikes because we're going to do some spikes on the tail as well. So I'm just painting the entire top and a little bit of the bottom, but you won't really see that, so it doesn't matter. And then I'm just going to let this dry. I found that the paint made the toilet paper roll flatten a little bit, so while it was drying, I just sandwiched it between two things so it would keep its curved shape. After the tail is dried, I'm going to take some clear packing tape about the length of the tail, and I'm going to try to stick it onto the tail while also folding it in half so it kind of sticks up a little bit. And this tape did not want to stick to the paint, so it ended up coming off for me, but as long as the whole tape doesn't stick together, it still works, and I just flattened it on like that. But now the tape is sticking up a little bit, and I'm just going to trim the excess. And you can always just use lots of small pieces of tape for this. Now I'm just going to cut little triangles for the spikes on the tail. And I made sure to cut my spikes smaller and smaller as it got to the edge of the tail. Now I know it's really hard to see, but next we're going to start painting it. And I'm using the same color I did with the other spikes, and I'm just painting it on both sides. Now this next step is optional, but I think it's really cute, so I'm going to be adding some little green nails to my stuffed animal. So I'm just folding up some green paper and cutting out some curved shapes. And since this is a pig and pigs only have 2 toes because they have hooves, I'm only going to do 2, but you can do however many you want, and I'm just going to stick it on with some tape. And by now my fingers are completely covered in paint. After sticking on all the nails, we can assemble everything. So the first thing is the tail. I'm going to tape it onto her actual tail, so I'm just going to put some tape under her tail and then putting the dinosaur tail on top and just sticking it under like this. And you might need more than one piece. Before attaching the spikes along the back, I'm first going to need to poke a hole with a pin. And be careful when doing this because I poked my finger really hard. But this is where we're going to put our thread. And then this way we can tie it around our stuffed animal. So I'm just going to put the thread through and cut off a pretty long piece. And now I can put this on our stuffed animal and just tie it around her neck a few times. And this is a little bit loose, so you can repeat this to other parts just so that it's tighter, but I think this was enough for me. And after that, your dinosaur costume is done! Now our third and final costume is going to be a flower. So this will work for any stuffed animal, and the first thing I'm going to do is wrap some yarn around her head, and this is just to measure how much yarn I'll need to wrap around her entire head. And my yarn is really thin, and I want something thicker for the petals to hold on to, so I'm actually going to take 3 pieces and braid them, but you can just use a thicker string instead. After that, I'm just going to grab some cardstock, and you can also use construction paper or thin cardboard, and I'm just going to be sketching out some petal shapes. I liked this one, but I think I wanted mine to be more pointy, so I made mine bigger and more pointy. And I actually had to make a lot of these because of how small they are, but if I were to do this over again, I would make them a little bit wider. And now I'm going to fold this cardstock in half, and then I realized I have to draw the petal with the base on the fold, so I redrew that and cut it out. And the rest I ended up just freehanding, and so they all looked kind of different, but that's okay. And you should end up with a double layer of all of your petals. After that, I'm just going to cut out some more until they fit all around her head, and if you make these wider, this will go a lot faster. Now I'm going to start sticking the petals around the string, and to do this I'm brushing a layer of just school glue on one side of the petal and just folding it up. And I would have just used a glue stick for this, but I actually didn't have one. And I also started bending the petals a little bit in the middle just to give it more of a petal look. And now I'm going to repeat that for all of the petals. This can take a really long time if you have a lot of petals like me, but it ends up looking really cool in the end. Make sure not to cover the whole string with petals because you still need to tie it around your stuffed animal's head in the end. Now the next thing I'm going to do is paint my petals. You won't necessarily have to do this if you used a color of cardstock that you like or construction paper, but if you used cardboard or were like me and only had one dark orange color of cardstock, then you can paint them whatever color you want. After painting all of them, I'm going to hang it up to dry. Now I'm going to make my stem and leaf, and you can use green construction paper, but I just had this old green notebook, so I decided to reuse that, and I'm just going to cut a stem shape and measure to make sure it fits. And now I'm just going to draw out a leaf, and I'm going to add some detail in there and then just cut it out. Now we can start putting all our components together. I'm going to start with the stem. So I'm just going to fold up a piece of tape, put one on the top and one on the bottom, and then just stick it to the front of her body like this. Now I'm going to tape on the leaf, and I'm just going to have the inside connected to the stem like this. And then we can add our petals. So I'm just going to wrap this around her head, and then I'm just going to tie the string into a bow on her neck, even though she already has a bow. And now the costume's done. I actually ended up doing another version of this with a smaller stuffed animal using construction paper for the petals. And that's all the costumes I have to show you guys. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, comment, and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more. And I'll see you next time.